Hey everybody, Coach here. Hey, check this out. Number one, long sleeve plaid shirt, long pants, had a jacket on a minute ago, and the umbrella is out. We're talking to you from the Black Hills of South Dakota. And this week's topic, we're talking about evergreens in the landscape. Those year-round sentinels that take care of us, even when everything else has gone to sleep. Hey, I'm glad you're here. Let's get started, shall we? You know, evergreens, they're not really known for their flashiness. They're not known for their blooming period necessarily. Some do, but when you think evergreens, you're generally probably thinking of these guys, which is going to be a focus of this episode, no doubt. But they don't rapidly come to mind when it comes to fall colors and that kind of stuff. Evergreens basically well, for lack of a better term, they kind of stand guard over all the greenery of the landscape when everything else is pretty much gone to sleep, lost its leaves, died back to the ground, or whatever. These guys, these industrial strength sentinels, they take care of your landscape and give it some form of interest when everything else is just covered in snow, bare to the bone, or the lawn is covered up. Either way, these guys are there when everything goes to sleep. They're there when they wake up, and they're the type of plants and trees that greet the bulbs, greet the perennials, and greet the spring annuals when you put them in the ground. They're there year-round, and I'd really like to strongly consider them for your landscape. Hey, some of them you're going to know, some of them you're not going to know. We're going to cover carnivorous type of evergreens. We're also going to cover broadleaf ones. Now, to keep this thing relatively in bounds and not a 12-hour episode, we're going to cover some, and then you, if you're interested, take off with it, go run and check out the nurseries, check out online, and see if there's some evergreens out there that could really do well in your landscape where you live in your growing zone and soil conditions. You know, for the most part, they come in all shapes and sizes. They serve so many purposes, which we're going to cover in this episode. You have everything from privacy screens to fillers and spillers. They're all kinds of useful type of plants that you can use in your landscape, and correctly thought out and a plan gone together, mixing evergreens with other deciduous plants, you will really kind of mimic Mother Nature. And Mother Nature has evergreens right next to deciduous shrubs and trees. It's the way she works. So without further ado, let's take a look at a few evergreens. I'm going to start with the coniferous type because we're pretty much familiar with those. And we're going to start off with pines, spruces, cypress, and the like. You know, when you're talking about these guys, in some of the more rural communities, in some parts of our country and world, you know, pines and spruces, just like this beautiful specimen behind me, they're just part of the natural landscape. And then we have our property in and around where we have placed our home and we've done our whatevers. These guys are naturally there, but not for everybody. And a word of caution here. Some of these guys get a little too big for the average residential yard. I don't suggest putting in some of the evergreens like redwoods, giant sequoia, western red cedar. Some of those guys, not unless you have a half acre, 3/4 of an acre, multi-acre property, because they just tend to want to go to wherever water is. And if it's under your foundation, those guys can lift it. If it's a sidewalk or a driveway, they can lift and crack. So you want to make sure your placement, even on the larger properties, is away from these types of element hardscape that you have in your yard. The other thing is all the natural ones. Now you can go and find spruces at almost any nursery, almost any time of year if they're still open. You'll find them in balled and burlapped. You'll find them in containers. You can do field dug at the wholesale nurseries. So they're out there, but a lot of specific ones you really have to search hard for, sometimes even online or special order. But you can get some of these types at a regular nursery almost any time. Let's take a look. Okay, one, pretty much a common staple in residential landscapes as far as pines, and that's the mugo pine. A nice, relatively dwarf, mid-bed, backdrop, standalone specimen, specialty pruning receptor, very, very well on those guys. Probably 6 feet by 6 feet maximum after probably 20 plus years. Mugo pines are used quite a bit, but I think people underestimate the final size. You know, they put them in the ground and they're little 18 inches tall and they look really good, but all of a sudden they hit that 5-10 year mark and they want to start to go up. So remember your spacing. Another one is Japanese black pine. Both the standard one, which is used in Japanese gardens, huge, large, standard bonsai specimens, and some of the dwarf variety too. I think it's called Kutaki or something like that. I remember it, horticulture class, been a while though. But they have a dwarf version as well. Very sweeping type of branches. You can really make it an interest, almost a focal point in your landscape. Other ones are dwarf white pines and the weeping white pine. Good residential type of pines that are small in scale, very manageable. Even like the tabletop white pine. Those things are great for rock gardens, hillsides, that kind of planting scheme. So check those out as well. Okay, moving on. Don't forget to check out some of the Cupressocyparis varieties, the false cypresses. Now, some people give Leyland cypress a bad rap, but they're really good in the right zones under the right conditions. They don't have a short lifespan. Now, where I used to work, Leyland cypress were generally a 20-year tree or less. But hey, up in the Pacific Northwest, the Northeast, some other places, man, those things are half a century long or more because they're just a little happier. They don't do well with that super dry heat. They want to have a lot of moisture and they want some attention sometimes with not only food, but also sometimes a little selective pruning. There's also the weeping cypresses, the Monterey cypress, lemon cypress that you'll often see come out around Christmas time. Lemon cypress is a small version of a much taller plant. So make sure when you get done with it, your little tabletop Christmas tree that has a beautiful lemon scent to it, yeah, if you plant it outside, make sure you know what the mature size is before you plant it. Then there's also a lot of the dwarf Alberta spruce, which we used at Weed Patch Ranch. That was our Christmas tree. And we had it for almost 9 years before we sold the ranch. But we brought it in every year. That was our Christmas tree, period. There's also weeping Engelmann spruce and some other ones. Now, some of those evergreens are probably not going to fare well in the Southwest desert. They're not going to fare well in maybe the deep south, like southern Georgia, Louisiana. They prefer the colder mountainous airs that are up north and in the Northwest. Okay, let's move on to another category, one that I used quite a bit, and I've talked about here on the channel in a lot of the Plant of the Weeks. And if you're interested, go check out some of those videos as well. The juniper family, Junipers for you botanical nuts. Junipers family is a rather large genus of plants, but for landscape purposes, I'm gonna give you some fillers and I'm gonna give you some screeners that really work well. And again, some of these are in Plant of the Week. Look for some of the screeners like Wichita Blue, Moonglow, Spartan, Taylor. All of the columnar type of evergreens that are relatively fast growing and probably not too much over 20 feet. And then they fill out to 3, 4, 5, 6 feet, depending on the variety. So if you have a really narrow bed, I would probably say no. But if you have a bed that's 4 feet or larger, you'll be able to use them, provided that they have enough sunshine. Columnar junipers are a great evergreen to fill that bill and not take much time, not much of your time at all. Very, very low maintenance. And again, rapid growing for some of them, you know, and you'll have a privacy screen within 3 to 5 years, maybe, something like that. So check out those varieties that I just mentioned. There's a real narrow one. It doesn't get up very tall though. It's called Pencil Point. Another one called Blue Arrow. So those columnar fast-growing junipers do really well. Now, as far as fillers go, fillers are going to be the backdrop, a backdrop of a larger bed, not a dinky bed, larger bed, 10 foot deep or more type of beds. Your fillers are backdrops, they're mid-bed type of plants, and in some cases, some of these varieties, you could even get them down in front and have other things in the back. So let's look at some of those ones. One is the Andorra Youngstown juniper, one that I really liked when I was in college because it gave you a four-season interest. Very feathery, soft-looking type of juniper. And then in the wintertime, it would turn this, I would say, kind of a coppery maroon color, a mix of those two colors. And so it made it kind of interesting. You know, you had an evergreen out there that actually gave you a little something other than green. Another one that will work as a mid-bed, if you have a smaller bed now, a mid-bed, or a front for a larger bed, and that would be gold lace. Gold lace works really well. It has the variegated chartreuse needles on it, and it does well way down into the cold temperatures. Gold lace, another one that's been around for decades. Probably one of the first variegated junipers I ever sold, and that was Old Gold. Old Gold is a mid-bed, sometimes a backdrop type of bed with the variegated chartreuse foliage. One that I grew up with on my parents' ranch, and that was the Tam juniper. Tam tends to want to come up and then spread out like this as far as a juniper. Oftentimes I think it's overplanted too close together, so it never really gets a chance to get into its full-blown mature look, which I think is kind of neat. So make sure you give it some space in between, somewhere between anywhere 6, even 8 feet apart, and then they will almost come touching together. Another one is Dobbs Frosted. Dobbs Frosted is one of those variegated ones, but it's not a chartreuse color, it's more of a off-white color, almost a yellowish eggshell color variegation to it. And if you want one that's going to be a creeper and a spiller, a couple ones that I give you for that is the Blue Carpet Juniper. I know that is on Plant of the Week. And I believe the Buffalo Juniper is as well. They're great for ground cover type of things. You can even use them as a lawn substitute. Lastly, one that's not spectacular, but it does its job, industrial strength and virtually no maintenance, that's the Parsons Juniper. Check that one out as well. Okay, now we're going to go off into evergreens that are not so coniferous. We're going to talk about smaller broadleaf type of evergreens. The industrial strength and really used all over the world. And that's the boxwoods and the hollies. Now boxwoods, you know, people love the green meatballs, or they love the boxes that they can make them, or the small hedgerows that they can create. And they take shearing very, very well. Just don't go too deep on them. And then there's the English boxwood, both the taller one and the dwarf. Dwarf is great for really narrow beds along walkways, and the regular English boxwood is for fillers in larger beds or slightly taller hedgerows, whichever you decide to do. When it comes to the hollies, I'm not going into the screening tall hollies, but we're talking about some of the Vomitora Schillings holly, Burford hollies and the like. These guys stand up to pretty darn cold temperatures. They take heats, they take colds, and they take a variety of soil conditions. The only thing they will falter on is if you have a real heavy soil that has very poor drainage. You either have to watch your water input very carefully or dig a massive hole for each plant. So there's plenty of drainage in and around and underneath the root ball. Okay, moving on to another category, and that's the Arborvitae. Now, everybody, for the most part, has heard about Arborvitae or the Thuya family. Now, the most useful trees and plants in this family is going to be the Emerald Arborvitae, the DeGroote Spire Arborvitae. These guys are privacy screens, backdrops, windbreaks or snow breaks. And these are the kinds that are really very, very hard to mess up with. The only thing people tend to do is incorrect planting depth, and they don't give it water when a heat wave comes around. They need to stay moist for several years until they're very well established and have found water deep down where they can survive almost anything. The other arborvitae that's very popular for privacy screens that get as big, if not bigger than these guys, is the green giant arborvitae. Kind of fast growing, good specimen standalone type, and it's also great for large windscreen or a big privacy screen. Not really for your little 50 by 100 foot lot. It's for a bigger lot with bigger beds. Green giant is a very popular arborvitae. And not to leave out the smaller arborvitaes, but this one here is one of my favorites, and you don't see it a lot except on special orders, and that's tater tot. Tater tot is a small one that you can put into beds, even smaller beds, maybe back in the corner with perennials in front of it type of thing. Tater tot doesn't get very big. A couple of feet by a couple of feet, and that is it. So as you can see, evergreens are not just the piney coniferous types. And the evergreens are broadleaf. And I want to go through a few that I've been exposed to over the years and that are excellent industrial strength and low maintenance. Let's talk about a few of them right now. Olives, both tree and shrub, fruitless, fruiting, and dwarf ones. The dwarf one is the little ollie. Little ollie we had at Weed Patch Ranch, and it worked out really good. One bed that I put it in, yeah, it should have been a little bigger because I had to really control it over the years that we had it. There's other trees that aren't super big, you know, like 15, maybe 20 feet by 20 feet, a good residential landscape fruitless olive, and look for Swan Hill or Majestic Beauty. And if you're really looking like we did, like to have fruiting olive trees, you can try the Mission olive, or what I really suggest is the Arbequina or the Frantoio, which is the one we had at Weed Patch Ranch. The most delicious olive oil you could ever imagine. It'll never, you'll just scoff at anything in a store after you've had fresh squeezed olive oil given to you at the end of a harvest. Indeed. Another one is magnolias. And I'm not talking about the deciduous magnolia, I'm talking about the regular southern magnolia. I prefer the dwarf varieties. Little Gem, Teddy Bear, those guys. If you like the big magnolia, the St. Mary's and the southern grandifloras, do it, but make sure you give them a lot of space. You have a lot of space. Their roots can get a little gnarly sometimes, so give them a lot of room. One of my favorite plants, and again, a little bit of color goes along with these guys, and that's the loropetalums, both the dwarf and the standard. Remember the standards when you buy them. They may be cheap, they may be on sale, but they can be a 10 by 10 foot monster where you're constantly shearing it to try to keep it in bounds. Certainly not meant for the narrow 4-foot bed. Okay, it's a big corner plant. But there's other ones like Purple Pixie. It's really a small one. We had that at Weed Patch Ranch as well. Only goes to about 2 by 2. And there's a myriad of everything in between. Loropetalum can handle down to about 15 degrees. So kind of a wide range anywhere from 7 to 11 type of USDA zone range. Loropetalum is one of my favorites. And then we talk about some of the more standard ones. Gardenias, azaleas, rhododendrons, winter creeper, Caprasma. Caprasma has come a long ways since my college days. Now they have the more hybridized, very colorful, variegated ones like Tequila Sunrise and some other ones out there. I think there's one called Mahogany that kind of has a really deep brown burgundy color to it. Good contrasting plant. And again, only about 3 by 4 or 4 by 3 size plants. Very, very shiny leaf and can handle probably down to zone 8 or so, something like that. So commonly known as mirror plant. A couple other ones that I've used is Abelia, and they have a beautiful, beautiful variegated ones now. and also viburnums. So these evergreens don't just come in conifer styles. They have a lot of different uses, a lot of different sizes, suns, part shades. Yes, not really a full shade plants per se. They want to have plenty of sunshine, at least 4 hours a day. And when old man winter comes rolling around, everything turns its flashy reds and flashy golds, and everything dies down to the ground or loses its leaves. These guys pick up the slack, and they have snow on their leaves, they have snow at their bases, and they are there throughout the rest of the winter for you. Gives you some interest outside when, if you had just a pure deciduous or perennial type of landscape, be pretty bleak looking. So give evergreens a lot of credit and check them out at the local retail nurseries that you have. The mom and pops will tend to have a better selection, but hey, some of the box stores and even Walmart sometimes comes through with fresh stock of these varieties that I've spoken about. So either as the center stage type of plant or as a backdrop, these guys really do a great job of solidifying various landscape themes. Bringing in the deciduous along with all the evergreens is the way you get a visual interest out there. And then mix in lower perennials, put in some annuals, have some bulbs coming up in the springtime, and you've done a very good job in rounding out a well thought out landscape. Those evergreens, the sentinels of the landscapes that are there year round, I really encourage you to check them out. Guys, that's what I have for you this week. I hope you tune in next week. Hey, give me a thumbs up if you thought you learned a little something here, and consider subscribing. Don't forget about our website, youryardcoach.com. Thank you this past week for a couple of the book purchases and the 15 DIY step landscape checklist. Really appreciate your trust and your patronage. Until next week, guys, as always, to your landscape success, appreciate your time. See you next Friday. Bye for now.